traditionally what you think about is DeFi that came about a few years ago in Ethereum. I think we're going to start to see some of those same applications around, just building out the economic stack. So like lending and leverage and just playing around with different economic primitives. I think it's going to be all about Bitcoin-fi.
All right, Carolyn Reckhow, COO of Thesis, thank you so much for joining us here at Mainnet.
Thanks for having me.
It's exciting to talk about what's happening in the Bitcoin scene because it really hasn't been all that built out when it comes to talking about Bitcoin layer 2s, things people can finally do with their Bitcoin. I know you've been in the game for a long time, but maybe we just start with kind of how Thesis looks at the opportunity right now and what you guys are doing with Mezzo, how it all fits together.
Yeah, so Thesis is a venture studio, and we've been around for about 10 years. We've done a lot of things, but Bitcoin's been a big theme, right? We started out in 2014 with Fold, which has gone through many iterations, but right now it is essentially an on-ramp into the Bitcoin ecosystem. It's a credit card that gives you Bitcoin rewards. And that project has spun out and has their own management. And since then, we've done a lot of different things. We built out TBTC in 2020 is when that launched. So TBTC is a decentralized Bitcoin bridge. Think of it as the decentralized version of WBTC. Started out on Ethereum, but right now it's on Arbitrum and Solana and other chains. Done some other things, built some wallets. We had an ordinals project, but right now we're focusing a lot on building out the Bitcoin economic layer and going beyond just the asset bridge and thinking about how you can bring DeFi onto Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Bitcoin-fi is the big theme for Thesis right now. Our belief is that while Bitcoin is, as an asset is king, there's still so much more that needs to be built out to allow a proper economy to actually function on the chain.
Yeah.
I want to live in a world where you can hold your Bitcoin, use your Bitcoin to take out a loan to finance a house, like real world use cases here. And we just don't have the tooling yet for that.
Yep.
So we're working on an L2 called Mezzo. Right now we are inching towards testnet. Next year at some point that's going to go live, but we do have a points program live right now. Acre is another one of our projects. It's basically a liquid staking protocol, allows you to earn on Bitcoin, actually put your Bitcoin to use.
Yep.
There's going to be some other things like stable coins, and there's a lot more to the ecosystem to build out. But for now, we're focused on those layers around staking and building the L2 infrastructure.
I think the thesis, if I may, of Thesis in terms of enabling a lot of those things for people to finally do anything with their Bitcoin is really, I think, the exciting piece now that we've seen the ETFs approved in 2024, just the idea of how much larger the market has grown on a dollar basis. When it comes to actually using their Bitcoin, that really hasn't taken off so much just yet. And so what do you think is maybe the most important piece of what you're trying to build at Thesis with Mezzo and everything else you mentioned in terms of making it easy for people to finally maybe break a little bit away from this idea of digital gold and just holding Bitcoin?
Yeah, exactly. I think there's definitely, a ceiling that we're up against when it comes to usability and user experience. I think the Ethereum community has, and Solana and some of these other ecosystems have made it a bit farther than Bitcoin has, but we can certainly learn from those communities and build ecosystems that are fun. Right? That's something that we've seen a lot, especially I think from the Solana ecosystem, right? They've made their blockchain fun and people come and played around. And once you get those early adopters in the ecosystem, once they find that there's some sort of value, there's something fun for them to do, then that sort of allows for more builders to come in and start to build an ecosystem that is more friendly, right, and brings in the next wave of users.
How much of that too, I mean, obviously earlier on in the crypto cycle we saw a lot of centralized players go down, whether it's BlockFi, whether it's Celsius, this idea of the need to decentralize, a lot of Bitcoin wrapping. There's a lot of players now going after that game.
Yeah.
How does Thesis look at maybe the opportunity and differentiation there? Because you've got, BitGo we can talk about and wrap Bitcoin, you can talk about Coinbase's new parlay into it too with BTC.
Yep.
So how do you kind of look at what Thesis wants to do in that arena?
Yeah, so we've been in the bridged asset, wrapped asset, whatever you want to call it. We've been in that game for a very long time. TBTC first launched in 2020, so it is definitely the longest running bridge in production. And we've definitely been talking to BitGo and to Coinbase, and it's really exciting to have these larger players in the space, because ultimately, though they're these centralized institutions, they see a place for decentralization, and they want to be able to foster that ecosystem, and for bridged assets, wrapped assets, to be as decentralized as possible. So I do think that there's a future where TBTC could potentially work with those projects, in building out something that's a little bit more centralized, slightly different models than the current ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, still in early days. I think there's still a big gulf between centralized and the DeFi ecosystem,
Yeah.
and Bitcoin is far from that.
Well, I wanted to talk about the DeFi ecosystem too, though, because obviously just recently the Aave partnership, in terms of, I believe that's TBTC that's integrated now with that.
Yeah.
Which I think is cool, because it doesn't only need to be the centralized players where you find users, it can be decentralized platforms like Aave to really start to show the traction and what can be done. I mean, how big of an unlock is that for what you guys are working on, and kind of what's the thinking around, maybe to your point, pairing the fun ecosystems where users are with what you provide on Bitcoin?
Yeah, it's definitely a milestone having a significant project like Aave in the DeFi space say, all right, we want to do things more decentralized, we're going to use TBTC instead of WBTC. But I do think that, there are potentially other partners that we could have in the DeFi space, and I think that we're going to see new entrants as well. Ethereum is, it's not going to be the only chain, where DeFi is important. I think bridging to other places, focusing on L2s and other chains would be interesting as well.
Yeah. No, I think the L2 game too, as we're talking about, you're here at Mainnet because you're going to be up on a panel talking about the importance of Bitcoin L2s. Stacks, another player in the game, you'll be up there with them. I mean, when you think about that opportunity in game, maybe people look at it as competition in terms of Bitcoin L2s looking at the same thing. But if you do agree that it's so early, there's a large enough pie for everybody. So how do you kind of think about working with other players in the space?
Yeah, exactly. I think, of course, there's competition, but the competition comes down to, TVL games, and some ways it's the points programs, that's the use case right now that we're seeing. But zooming out, right? I love teams like Stacks and Muni because they have that longer term, bigger vision of how we can bring the next billion on chain. And the problem we're up against is really product market fit, right? We don't have a lot of users right now on Bitcoin, or even just DeFi generally. So I think in Bitcoin L2s in particular, the journey for us is we're all in it together, or trying to find what is that use case, whether it's going to be something more pure in the Bitcoin financial space, or if there's some sort of decentralized social or gaming play. There's a lot of things that could unfold.
I almost feel like it's, when you're merging money and attention online in the era of Web3, I don't know if you need both. I mean, maybe you can have just large TVL and have everything function fine, or you can have a lot of users and have things function fine. and maybe both, but I mean, with the unlock of the ETFs, you now have a lot of custodians sitting on a lot of money in held Bitcoin. Is like part of the bet too that eventually some of those funds might be able to do things with their large stashes of Bitcoin, and that's also equally a large opportunity?
Yeah, definitely. So Acre is thinking a lot about like some of those big stacks of Bitcoin, right, that are coming online, and people coming from more traditional finance are definitely thinking like, what's next, right? I think it may be a little while before they feel like the due diligence is there, but like now's the time to be building it and finding the yield and building those products. So yeah, it's very exciting to be a part of that and talk with these new entrants and figure out what it is that they want and like what their risk profile looks like, things like that.
For building in a space like that too, obviously it becomes tricky to, I guess, look at the metrics that Carolyn thinks are important, right? In terms of showing, okay, we're steadily on the right roadmap. I mean, at Thesis, what are kind of some of those metrics that you're looking at and saying, hey, there's something here, I enjoy what I'm seeing, and obviously with Mezzo just launching, the numbers have been pretty cool to watch.
Yeah, I know. TVL is like the big metric that everyone seems to care about, and of course you have to think about it, but in a lot of ways it's not the most important one, and it's, maybe you could even think of it as like a vanity metric. Like there's a lot of ways that you can massage it and make it look nice. But for us, we're really thinking a lot about like building the network. So validators are really important for us, especially as we're going into testnet this quarter. And users, right? Like people who are coming on the chain and playing around with our points. We have some really interesting stuff going on in our community right now where we're like playing games and experimenting with like SocialFi, as we're calling it, and like gaming using kind of our points, right? So we're not on mainnet yet, so we have this like sandbox, but like we're really looking at, okay, people who are coming into the chain, like, are they having fun? Are they getting value out of it? Are they playing around with some of the things that we've got for folks to play around with? That's, at this stage, what we're looking at.
Well, I mean, our community, speaking just for myself, but also what we're hearing from them, we have more than 7,000 NFT holders, and everyone just keeps telling us, like, hey, pay attention to what Mezzo's doing, pay attention to what Thesis is doing, because I think a lot of people have seen that excitement in the Ethereum world, but now that it's spilling over to Bitcoin, is starting to really gather a lot of excitement, and we've seen that in our own community as well. But Carolyn, to wrap up, kind of when you look at next year, it's crazy to think that 2024 is almost done. What are kind of your bold calls for what people should expect, maybe what they're sleeping on, when it comes to the evolving world of using Bitcoin beyond just holding it? What are you going to be watching for? What should we say in a year's time? Wow, Carolyn was right with that big bold call she made at mainnet.
I think it's going to be all about BitcoinFi. So extending, traditionally what you think about is DeFi that came about a few years ago in Ethereum. I think we're going to start to see some of those same applications around, just building out the economic stack. So like lending and leverage and just playing around with different economic primitives. I also think that we're going to see a few fun things pop up, right? I don't know what the friend.tech will be on Bitcoin, but I think we'll have one in 2025.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of interesting technical things when we're talking about the infrastructure and Bitcoin L2 capabilities. There's a lot of folks betting on the ZK rollup model. So if OpCat does happen, I guess not holding my breath, right? I've been in crypto for 10 years and things move slowly in the Bitcoin world, but that certainly could be significant if that moves forward.
Yeah, and perhaps maybe that's part of the reasons it's built that way, is you don't have huge booms and busts relative to other things in crypto, just because these things do take time in the Bitcoin world. But Carolyn, thank you so much for sitting down with us. Appreciate it, and congrats on everything you guys are building at Thesis.
Thanks, Zach.